Hi guys, this is your host Tweak, and here's just a short disclaimer that the following episode features some vocabulary that may be considered profanity or vulgar, and might not be deemed appropriate for younger listeners, so your discretion is advised. Hello everyone, and welcome to the third episode of our podcast Contact Lost from Poland about the Polish competitive scene, but also about the international competitive scene. Today with me, I have some amazing guests, so please give a warm welcome to our staple, Joker.
Hello again.
With us, we have also Piotr or Tyfus, the one that you should know by now from the first episode. Hi, dude.
Thanks for having me again.
Welcome. And last but not least, the main coordinator of the Polish league, Dejv.
Thanks for having me for the first time. I believe it's gonna be special.
So, listen, guys, this episode is going to focus on a topic that is very hot right now, which is tableside manners. And we will try to work out some tips and hints for making our games a pleasure and not a harrowing experience. I believe this topic has been touched on a number of other podcasts, but hopefully we will give you a brand new, fresh look on the topic. But before we get to the merit of the episode, as usual, I would just like to make a couple of announcements for our listeners. The first one, like I mentioned last week, the Three City League is up and running again. We have a bunch of players already signed up. The games are already taking place, but still, if you want to participate, do let me know. Do visit 3city40k.pl and feel free to sign up. Let me know if you want to participate, if you want to be in one of the groups, and I'll make sure that you are involved. So that would be one thing. Another announcement, Dragonstore PL is organizing 3 tournaments in September. One on the 8th of September, that's going to be 500 points. A patrol. The second one on the 19th of September. This will be a 2,000 point singles tournament that is going to happen overnight. So something that we haven't done before. I'm really keen to see how it goes, especially that I'm going to participate in that one myself. And the third one is going to happen on the 27th of September, also a 2,000 point singles event, and you can still sign up for the event. So go check your Facebook, check the calendar, and do sign up. For all the information about competitions and tournaments happening in Poland locally, make sure that you head on to wh40k.pl, which is the all Polish forum about wargaming and 40k in particular. In the tournament and events section, you will find all the threads about all the events that are planned for the next weeks and months. So make sure you go to that website and you subscribe for the forum, and you'll get all the latest information about all the events happening in Poland. And one of such events that I would like to highlight to you, although it is not a Warhammer 40k event, our friends from the Bolt community here in the north of Poland are organizing a themed event called Bolt Action Blitzkrieg. So if you are keen to see some of the biggest battles of the Second World War played out on some amazing terrain, and if you are in the area of Rumia, make sure you head to Stacja Kultura by the main train station. An unforgettable experience awaits for you. If you cannot make it, still I encourage you to see the videos that I linked in the comment so from some previous events. And this year, the guys managed to obtain subsidies from Rumia City Council and the Gdańsk City Council, and all those funds have been invested into new terrain that the event will feature. It's an open entry, so make sure you don't miss it, guys. And last but not least, you can now find us not only on YouTube, but also on iTunes, Spotify, Facebook, Anchor, and all the other podcasting platforms. But no matter where you listen to us, though, please help us grow by liking us, subscribing, and by leaving a comment about your best practices when it comes to tableside manners and sportsmanship. And now, on to the episode. So, let's get to the nitty-gritty of it. Let's start with our new guest. So, Dejv, who are you? What is your experience with the game? I know that you've been playing for a while, you've been refereeing for a while. Which of those gives you more pleasure?
Hard question. But from the start, yeah, so I've been playing 40k in a rather competitive way for a few years now. I started from the local tournaments, then after 1.5 years, I believe, or 2 years, I've been a part of the Polish team for the ETC 2018, yes, where I played KS Demons, a big spam of Plague Bearers. Previously, I was playing Brimstone spam, so you can get a taste of my kind of armies. Mostly a lot of really resilient and annoying things on the table. And then in 2019, I decided to be a referee. Tyfus helped me to become one.
With me not being able to go to ETC.
Yeah, ETC referee team just needs someone from Poland to send to the worst tables with most arguing players with most difficult nationalities. So yeah, they need a Polish guy, so they choose me. And that was a really, really good fun, but it was unexpectedly a lot of job and a lot of walking. I was exhausted, but it was still really pleasant. But in the long term, I cannot strictly say if I prefer to play or prefer to be a referee. Being a referee is cool if you are a referee at the WTC or ETC previously, the big tournaments with a lot of people. It's more satisfying, of course, and I believe that playing is as good as at the ETC as it could be at the local tournaments sometimes. So there's no clear answer, but as you can see, I know some things. I played, I was a referee, so I know both sides of the game, and I met some really weird people and really fantastic people at the table. So yeah, we can try to talk about how to behave and how to be a good player.
Cool. And for those of you who didn't listen to the first episode, Tyfus, who is also on the call, also used to referee and he also used to play. So we actually have two people who definitely are in the position to tell us something about major events and people's behavior at those events. So tell me that maybe before we get to like the proper questions, just do you even happen to play not competitively at all right now? Or like do you play for fun or is competitive all that you do?
Well,
Okay.
I'll start by answering that question first. Well, for me, playing competitively is fun. I mean, I can play competitively and have fun while playing some weird lists that are really unconventional. For example, one that Dejv is actually playing right now was my idea 2 years ago, I think. And yeah, for me, having fun is almost always connected with smashing other people, but in a friendly manner, while having few drinks and enjoying the time spent together. Even though that sounded weird, but whatever.
Okay, Dejv?
Sense perfectly. So it's Tyfus really stole my answer because I can only have fun playing competitively. I believe 2 years ago we tried to make some fun tournament where you were supposed to bring the worst list you could possibly imagine, and I was really struggling to even make one because each time I tried to make something stupid in the list, that part of my brain just told me, "Don't." Put something else, something that would work. So it's just like I cannot play it like narrative play or casual playing, and it just the way I enjoy the game is by playing competitively, and it's just fun for me. It's not like you cannot have fun without playing competitively. Of course, every person have a way of enjoying this game. Everyone has one. But for us, it's being competitive while having fun or having fun while being competitive.
Right.
I think this statement should generalize to not only me and Dave, but to nearly every competitive player that attended ETC. I think there's like a part of personality of a person that goes to those tournaments, that reps those tournaments, that you truly need to be competitive from nature to really enjoy those tournaments. I'm not saying you cannot enjoy them if you're actually a casual, but mostly people who go there are actually competitive, for maybe except some people from like Northern Ireland who always come there to have fun, which I applaud. Like they are great people. But enough of off topic. Me and Dave are great at it when we are together, so I'm sorry in advance.
Yeah, no worries. We'll try to have control over it.
Far away from the topic.
Yeah, no worries. Joker, a question to you, because you were one of those guys in the north of Poland who came to the conclusion that, competitive sometimes becomes too competitive, and you started organizing those like chill meetings for people to bring whatever they have and to just have fun without like any points set. Choose the missions that you want, do whatever you want. So what do you think? Is it possible to play competitively and have fun, or do you have to separate those two things?
I think it's possible. I mean, it's just when you're playing competitively or where you're playing at all, there's you just need to adhere to one simple rule: don't be a dick.
True.
That's it. The target audience for those events was different. Different people would come to the, let's call it, chill playing, and different people came to tournaments. Sometimes the guys that would come to the chill out sessions would later try their lists at tournaments, but that wasn't often the case. So it's just, yeah, like I said, the target audience is different for those kind of events, and it's just down to the person if they want to try and if they feel competitive at times, or just want to play casually because they don't have the time to, follow the meta all the time, and they only manage to get out once every 3 months to have a game. The tournament isn't something that's going to appeal to them.
All right, guys. From my observation, it does happen, and it happens more often than not, that people with whom I get along really well in like everyday situations and everyday conversations, when they go to a tournament, when they are placed in that competitive setting, suddenly they turn into someone completely different, into someone else. And sometimes, to that kind of people that I wouldn't really like to spend time with. Is that only my observation, or is this something that you perhaps see as well? Tyfus, let's start with you.
So I can tell from my perspective, I think I am such a person. It's not like I become suddenly, as Joker mentioned, a man's private part, but it's like you always have the spark that you want to win. Maybe you don't want to win at all costs, but you still kind of lose some of that spark that's just going there to play. Maybe it's just from my perspective, but it still means that I would play differently when I would just go for example, national team meeting and play with guys to find out new rules or new tricks or things that would actually work out on the table. But when it comes to tournaments that you actually go there to win, usually most players do, you can at times be kind of different, because when there comes to some kind of discussion or disagreement, it can become heated. Usually it doesn't, but when it does, which is really rare, but it does, especially at tournaments with higher stakes like WTC, then it's completely different.
All right. Dave, what do you think?
For me, it's a rather simple thing. It's not a rocket science, it's neurobiology. So we are still competitive. We are fighting over something. Our brain do not exactly know that there are plastic figurines involved, but still our brain just works like that. There's adrenaline, there's dopamine rushing our brains and making us more aggressive sometimes. Maybe even making it discomfort for the other player. So when you have a situation like this, when your opponent is getting too hyped on the winning, is getting angrier or even aggressive, just take a break, 2 to 5 minutes, get your both heads cool down. It will go away. Try again. If it's happening again, then there's probably a problem with the person you're playing with, but usually it helps and it just goes away. Of course, everyone when is playing, especially when you are playing some games that are tie, you don't know from the start that you're gonna win or lose, but you can win and you do everything you can to win, then your brain is getting you more pumped up upon it, and you still, sometimes can get lost in it and just act like a dick. But it's simple psychology. Just give it a minute break, take a stroll, drink a beer, go for a cigarette, whatever works.
To expand what Dave just said, there's one thing that I've been always doing when I was going to tournaments and meeting new people. One of those things is actually buy yourself and the other person they drink a beer, because it sets up completely different environment for the game, because you are kind of chill from the start, which like tells your opponent that you are here to play, but not to play, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one thing. Or other things that, for example, our national team was doing for years, and that actually other people from other teams enjoyed playing against us, is that we had some gifts. For example, we had like national dice, some national markers, or other gadgets for the game that you began your game with your opponent, giving them some free stuff, like as an appreciation of the fact that you are playing here after spending thousands of your currency to get here. And I think there are many ways you can actually do that.
That's actually really cool. Is that an original idea that you guys had, or did you observe other teams doing that?
From what I can tell from like rolling back the years, I think we were like one of the first teams to actually do that, because a lot of those, let's say, bits shops that produce alternative figurines, etc., are from Poland. And we've been sponsored by them for years now. I don't remember when was the first time, but I think it was like even back in 2009. So the idea, I think, maybe it didn't originate in Poland. I'm pretty sure it originated somewhere else. But when it comes to ETC, there were multiple teams that were actually doing stuff like this. For example, there's one team that me and Dave have a special place in heart when it comes to WTC, and that's Romanian team. They, for example, always brought this special homebrew. And by homebrew, I do not mean coffee.
Moonshine.
Yeah, moonshine is a better term for that.
It's not moonshine, but it's really close to it. It's 70% strong, so it really sets your nerves down.
Oh yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, so there are teams that actually do that, and I think during the years I could see that more and more teams actually done that. I remember back in 2012 when there was the WTC in Gorzów in Poland. The Irish team actually brought one bottle of, I think, 300 milliliters whiskey per opponent. So they actually counting that they had 5 games, because I think that ETC only had 5 games. That actually meant 5 times 9, including coach, 45 bottles of whiskey for their opponents, just as a gift.
Seriously?
So, yes.
Wow.
That's why you play ETC, to get a free booze.
That's the best sort of advertisement, I guess.
And now you've motivated me to try to get into the team.
Yeah.
That's how it works.
Oh,
Oh yeah.
All right, guys. So I would like to get to the topic of ETC/WTC in a moment, perhaps. But I still wanted to stay in the topic of, let's say, something more down to earth, something that let's say the majority of people could relate to. I observe in myself, for example, that I only get to play once a week, most. Sometimes maybe twice a week, but once a week usually.
That's pretty often.
Well, it's okay. It's definitely better than it used to be. But I observe that when I get to play once a week, I want that time to be like high quality time. And that quality time usually means I want to win. So if I don't get to win, I, I'm trying to fight this off. But sometimes it happens that when I play like a Space Marine army, for example, that I start to bemoan the army of my enemy. Like, oh my God, this is so strong, or those infiltrators are just ridiculous, or something like that. So I guess this is my observation about myself, but also about other players that, it's not because you mentioned aggression by the table. I think what is even worse sometimes, because aggression, like, getting really angry, etc., it allows you to release the emotions. But being passive aggressive or being that moany guy is even worse because it kills the entire mood of the game. So to everyone listening, don't do that. Don't be like me. And I'm also trying to do away with this. So
It's hard not to be grumpy when you play a stupid army. If you want to play stupid army, that's the cost of it. You have to listen to that shit.
thank you. That makes me feel much better.
That was my point.
Great.
you
Now he's
remember,
gonna get more annoying.
yeah, and
Listen
you
to me,
remember
I've
when,
played the most annoying list the game has seen for the last 3 years. So believe me, I have listened to all of this. You just have to live with that. It's like part of the game.
Yeah, you
when
probably enjoyed that.
Yeah. That was the part of the list, not to win, just to listen to the pain.
yeah,
And
there was
lamentation
one
of the women.
yeah, there was actually one Winter Team Championship when they brought all those brimstones, and when he was writing the battle reports, he actually had a special paragraph that he was just telling in the battle report on which turn his opponent was dead mentally, like he was gone, like he saw no more pleasure from the game. Thankfully, those armies are gone. I'm really glad because early 8 was terrible. But yeah, as I said earlier, we are great at going off topic.
Yeah, again, don't worry about that. I already have the next question ready. So the whole idea for this episode and the whole idea for bringing the topic of sportsmanship, to the podcast is because recently I've played in a tournament where I played an opponent that I haven't met before. And I got to this point where, I wasn't sure if he knows the rules of my army or not, because he played Blood Angels, I had my Grey Knights, and Grey Knights got some significant boosts in the recent Psychic Awakening. So, on one hand, I wanted to be fair, and I wanted to explain to him what my army does. But on the other hand, I didn't really want to give away like the all the details of my strategy because come on, it's a tournament. So, how far do you go in explaining like the intricacies of your army to your opponent? I know that at those high level tournaments like the ETC, it doesn't happen. Everyone should know all of the armies or the majority of the armies. But like when you go to your local tournaments in Warsaw, for example, and you meet a new guy and he might not know your army, how far do you go in explaining what your army does and and not revealing what your army does? Dave, let's start with you.
Yeah, it's a rather difficult question, but I'd like to reference it to Dice Crusher tournament in Torun. This was a special kind of tournament when you played 2 games against every opponent. At the first game, he played your army and you played his. On the second, you played your army and he played his. So before the first game, you really had to tell your opponent what your army does, but not too much because you have some aces in your sleeve. But still, that's somehow how we should think about it, because when you start to telling your opponent what your army does at the WTC ETC, it's obviously easier because everyone knows the game better, everyone is up to date with the meta game, with the new rules, new stratagems, new FAQs, etc., etc.
And has teammates who can explain.
Yeah, that's also a big one. But still, there are still questions to clarify something, to explain something. It's obvious that you just tell your opponent what your army is made of, which units did it take, etc., etc., their war gear, their abilities, traits, psychic abilities. But I believe it's a good manner to just tell your opponents the things that are not so obvious, that are special for your army. Like if you're playing Genakul, just explain how the 3 inches deep strike works. If you're playing, I don't know, Word Eaters, for example, like me now, explain how double activation for Berserkers work, or that you can move one of your unit before the game begins. So things like that that are really important, especially extra moves, doing something before the game starts. Like you have the Deceiver that could redeploy for a few units. That you have to think which decisions your enemy have to make, and just think what things from my army can affect them in a real way, and just tell him about them.
If you're right, so asking a question like, do you know my army? That's not enough, I guess. But then,
of course, you can do it, and then when your opponent just falls into one of your traps, and you're like, but you say you know my army, you can do it. No one will punish you for that. But it's a dick move. You don't do it. It's not a gentleman gaming, and we want to have gentleman gaming in that system, because that's what we do. We don't want to be a bunch of assholes that just try to rip against each other. We want to have fun while being competitive, as we stated before.
Yeah, so the game, I guess, is this kind of a social contract that you have, like the gentleman's game, or at least in the perfect world, that's something that you want, but it's not always the case. So when I was playing that guy, I had an apothecary in my list. And what you can do with the apothecary is you can drop 3 inches away from the enemy. You have a really strong spell that has only 1 inch range, but you can increase the range to like by 6 inches, and you can literally just kill a character, for example, if you drop next to him with mortal wounds. So now, what I was, trying to digest was, should I explain to him all that, or just like give him all the 3 rules and let him connect the dots? If he doesn't, then well, it's his fault. Or should I not go into it at all? So, but I guess there are many situations like that. So,
okay, yeah, let me answer that. So, from my point of view, there are 2 approaches depending on the person you are playing against. If you see that's a newer player or someone who isn't really well known in your community, you tell them everything. Because there is always the point that if they die and lose the game, not like literally die, I hope no one literally dies because of losing at the table, but when they lose the game because they didn't know about something, they might be really demotivated, because there's like one gimmick that really swung the tides, but it's not really fun. And what I've done when I was playing against like newer players, I was actually telling them if they made a wrong move, or if they made some kind of move, for example, exposing a character for double move from warp time and charging him, I would tell them that, do you know I have warp time and I can move second time? If they do not connect the dots, then okay, that's fine. Like they had their chance, but I warned them that I can do something like that. And I think that should apply to all games with like newer people. But when it comes to the games, for example, when you play against another top tier player. For example, when I would play against Dave, yeah, I know that's really egoistical of me, but when we would play against each other, we actually know pretty much our armies, and if it happens that he would be aware that I can do some tricks, I'm pretty sure Dave would ask me. He would ask me, can you do something like that? If so, how can you do that? And later, if I would do something like that after telling him I couldn't, that's a dick move.
Right.
So
that's the penalty.
So yeah. And for example, at ETC, there's an approach that if you've said one thing and done the opposite, you can get penalized, and your whole team can get penalized, because that's just a dick move. And I think that should be like a rule of thumb when it comes to this, that you should not only tell your opponents like the basics, like Dave said, like he can move before the game, etc. Or in your case, when you said that you can teleport or deep strike the apothecary within 3 inches and then cast a spell, you can tell them the basic rules when you play against like a top tier opponent, and they probably should be able to connect the dots. And I think it's your responsibility as well as a player to ask your opponent if they have certain tricks. Of course, you do not ask them, what are your tricks? But you formulate a more specific question that has something in mind. So, for example, if you are afraid of someone killing your really, really important character, then you can ask, can you do, for example, the double movement from warp time, etc., etc. So I think it should be, and it shouldn't be only on one side to tell the opponent the army, but you should always take care of yourself as well.
I would like to add one thing. If you are wondering if you should tell your enemy about some of your tricks and you're not sure, then you shouldn't be. Because if your strategy is based upon your enemy not knowing the rules of your army, or not knowing the combos in your army, then your strategy sucks. Because you want to aspire to be the best, always, even if you're playing not as competitively as some people, but you still should try to be a best player, to improve your skill, improve your tactics. So you cannot base it upon enemy not knowing your army. You should even wish that they know these tricks, because then you can play better against a better enemy, and you will improve, and your gameplay would improve. So don't be afraid of telling your enemy that you can do this or that, because in the long term it will make you a better player.
Yeah, and don't
to
base
win with
your
skill and
sorry,
not
Joe, keep
with the opponent not knowing what you're doing. So that just leaves a bit of a bad taste.
Yeah, there is a difference between the element of surprise and just using those gotcha moments to actually, abuse your opponent. So, to our listeners, yeah, be mindful of that. So, yeah, Joker, apart from what you just said, you've been really quiet. So, do you, as a person who also travels to tournaments, who, I don't know, you went to Prague with me, for example, last year, can you name any good practices that come to your mind that players could adhere to during games or maybe pre-game? Something that people can do to just make their games a better experience for themselves and for their opponents.
Yeah, I've been quiet because you skipped me for answering the 2 questions that we had before.
Sorry for that, mate.
Yeah, but our guests answered them pretty much perfectly, so I wouldn't have much to add to that, especially the last one, what Tyfus said, just +1 to that. Either way, good practices. So, yeah, well, be a gentleman, as I would now better put what I said at the beginning of the podcast. I think that's rule number 1. And yeah, I think in a situation where you're pre-measuring distances, for example, you can agree with your opponent. Wait, do I have range here? Is it an H in charge? Is, and then you just stick with it, and not argue about it later. I think that's some of them, and yeah, just be chill, really. I mean, you can enjoy a competitive game at the highest level and be a gentleman, as we've said before.
Okay, very cool. Tyfus, any ideas from your end? So any good practices, stuff that you do,
Other
stuff
than
that
drinking beer.
other than drinking beer, yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, I also drink some stronger liquors at times, but I think that's not the answer to your question.
No,
So,
exactly.
no, actually, the one that Joker mentioned, there's always one thing that you should make sure that you should not only pre-measure stuff, you should always make sure that your opponent knows what you are actually doing and planning to do. So if you're actually trying to, for example, move your model in a way that his left shoulder pad could see certain part of a rhino and at the same time see, for example, obliterators, you should mention that to your opponent and then look at it together. So, for example, move it. If they do not agree, if he says that's not doable and you think that's doable, you can call a ref, although ref will hate you for that because that's like, like that's just wasting time. You can, there's always the caveat of something that's not really clear, but usually those things can be settled between the players. So I think making sure that your opponent knows what you're doing. So, because usually during your turn, the most they can do is actually use stratagems. And you can actually make sure that they know what you're doing in a way that you're not revealing your whole plan. And as I said, moving certain model in a specific way, telling them what's your plan so you won't argue later, which is, for example, one specific case of that is the one that Joker mentioned. So that really makes the game easier for both sides. And as in every healthy relationship, you need to talk together about your problems, and same should apply to board games.
Yeah, correct. Good. Dave, your comment. Any other practices? Something
Yeah,
that you do on everyday basis?
If you want to have a good and easy play, you should just start from the beginning. So before the game begins, you should talk with your opponent about table, about terrains. That's always the case. If you don't do it at the start of the game, just agree what is a ruin, what is a forest, what is a hill. If there's some kind of not obviously formed terrains, you should agree where it starts, where it ends, and how tall it should be, etc., just to have it done. Because if one of you believe that it's a crater and another one thinks it's a ruin, it could make some problems in the future turns. You could agree on things like when you re-roll the dices, if they land on the terrain, do you re-roll them or do you just accept how they lay? Simple things like that. If you do it at the start of the game, you will make every other turn easier. And of course, talk about your armies, about the crucial stratagems, etc. What else? Drink a beer. Take your time to really just be sure that you ask your opponent about everything. It's better to ask at the beginning of the game. Do not rush anything. Check your missions twice, etc. Because the more careful you approach the first turn and preparation for the first turn, the easier the whole game would be.
Okay, then let me ask this. I've had this a couple of times, both at tournaments and like friendly games, where a player on the other side of the table would say, for example, a guard player would say, dude, let's agree, unless I state otherwise, my infantry will always have the order to, I don't know, run, or whatever. Is that something that you would accept? Like or a Necron player that says, unless I say otherwise, at the beginning of every turn, that unit gets those rerolls from my overlord or whatever. Is that something that you are willing to accept, or is it again something that your opponent shouldn't really ask because it's just lazy?
It's obviously you should accept it. It's in a good taste, because if it's clearly stated and you clearly agree to that, you stick to it. It's easy. especially for obvious things. And then if your enemy agreed to it and then tried to tell you that no, it's not true, at the WTC, he would be more likely to get warned or even carded than the one who just tells that okay, unless otherwise stated, I'm doing this and this every turn. So I believe it's the way to play it as a gentleman. It's gentleman agreement. If you agree, you stick to it, you keep it, and it makes everyone's life easier.
All right. Tyfus, would you say that you allow takebacks, for example? Because
I maybe when I started my gaming I don't know, history, I don't know the word, I cannot find the word right now, but when I started playing the game, I wouldn't allow them that much. I wanted to win, but right now I think that really connects with what I think Joker said. You want to win the game by being a better player and not by your opponent making like really stupid mistakes. So, for example, your opponent shot his 5 scouts on an objective into your 5 Kabbalites, and he forgot his psychic phase. Like, you would allow it because that one shot doesn't change anything, and it would be obvious that they would do the psychic phase anyway. Or if they forget to charge somewhere on like a fringe objective that you know they would do, then you allow it. Of course, there are you need to make sure that you are not allowing a take back. For example, when your opponent realized that he wasn't able to kill your rhino with this one squad, and then when he shot and didn't kill it, then he would like to move that unit back. No, that's not. That's like the limit. Just for the obvious
that's over
stuff.
the limit by a mile.
So yeah, there's like I would say I allow takebacks, and I think from recent years, WTC was more even forcing players to allow takebacks. So, for example, if someone didn't know about like a certain ruling that happened during the tournament, because those things happened, and you would like to take advantage of that, well, then we would allow a take back because it's clear he didn't know about it. So there was a lot of cases when one player would say, no, you cannot do that. It's too late. And we as a referees would just ask that player if he is sure what he is saying. And after we were made sure that he wanted to be a dick, then we as a referees would actually warn him or card him and then let his opponent do the take back, because it's still a gentleman's game. And of course, as I said, there should be a border between what you actually allow to take back and what you do not.
Yeah. Dave, you mentioned one interesting thing as a good practice that you should discuss with your opponent, for example, how you approach re-rolling dice. So I've had this with some of my opponents who said, whenever the dice like rolls onto terrain, let's re-roll it because it can always be cocked and so on and so on. So is this, for example, like a house rule at your tournaments, or is it just something that you recommend, or that would be recommended for the ETC/WTC?
It's a recommendation. It's something not exactly written down. It's more like a part of the culture, like right now. So it's a good practice. Just reroll these dices. When you do it, you are 100% sure that you would have no problems with deciding what's the result, if it's that dice cocked or not. You are sure then. So it's a good way to do it. Agree with an opponent on that and just do it. But it's really important to do it at the before the battle begins. Because when you remember it at the first or the second turn, when your enemy has good throw for something like D6 mortal wounds, and he rolls a 6 that lands in the terrain, and then if you happen to remember the rule of re-rolling from terrains, then it would be a rather dick move. So just remember to do it before the battle.
Right.
So what we were actually doing in the recent years, and I've seen more people in the community actually doing, is not only re-rolling everything that's on the table, not on that flat table, and for example on terrain, people were bringing their own like rolling boards. I don't know how to call it. They would just have a separate space where all dice rolls would happen.
So like dice trays.
Yeah. So when they had those dice trays, they made sure that all the rolls are on one space. There would be no arguments whether a certain dice is cocked or not. Maybe one will land on top of each other, then you re-roll that one. But those are like obvious ones. So yeah, I think that's actually a good approach. For example, leave a space on the board where nothing's happening. So one board edge where no one deployed, and use that space to roll all the dices. And I think that's the best approach. It makes you not argue at all.
Yeah, sounds very healthy. All right. And as referees, and I'm asking all three of you because Joker, you've been a referee to some at least local tournaments here in the north of Poland as well. How do you tackle players who try to take advantage of slow play? Because I think, especially in 8th, this was a hot topic at some point. People built their armies to sort of benefit from slow play. So how can you? What are the tools that you have at hand to actually tackle that? Joker, let's start with you.
I haven't really penalized that at local tournaments because it's sometimes hard to prove that someone is slow playing. I mean, at one point it's kind of obvious, but there isn't really any hard proof. So yeah, but at local events there hasn't really been a problem too often. No one's been complaining about others playing too slowly, at least not during the tournament when you can do something about it. Afterwards, sometimes yes, but not during them, not during games.
Right, so those were the local tournaments. And now, Dave, at the bigger tournaments that you participated in, how was that resolved?
There's one device to rule them all. It's called the chess clock. So at the WTC and last ETC, it was mandatory to use chess clocks at the table. So there was these situations were really easier to solve as a referee because you saw the numbers, who played how much. Of course, there was like one or two situations when there was like, oh, he played in my part of the time, it was a mistake. But usually, unfortunately, it was players who were chill and cool with playing and didn't have any problems, and then just agreed to split the rest of the time. Anyway, chess clocks are the best tools. If you don't want to do it, what I understand, it's not always comfortable playing with the chess clock, especially when you're more laid back at playing. If you see that your enemy is playing slow, just react accordingly and in time. Because if it's fifth turn or fourth turn, you have 10 minutes left to report your scores, and you now find out that your enemy is playing slowly and you want to report it to the referee, you have a problem because it's senseless. It's too late to do anything. You won't find a referee coming to your rescue and just giving him penalty points. Well, maybe 1 in 100 situation it would look like that, because it would be obvious violation of the rules. But if you see that your enemy is playing slow, just tell him, okay, guy, you're playing too slow. I'm afraid I won't be able to do my things. I think we wouldn't be able to finish the whole game. You have to speed it up. it's not rude, just do it, just tell him, communicate the fact that you think he's playing slow. If you do it 1 or 2 or even 3 times and he's still playing slow, you could then ask the referee. Of course, if it's not too late, you should do it rather quickly. And then the referee would decide, look at the game, look at his play style. Usually when the referee is at the table, the other player would stop slow playing already and would know that you know what you're doing, because he won't try to do it again. Or if he's not slow playing at the purpose, because he's just slow player, the referee could make him move faster. Then the referee would have possibility to act. It's really important to remember that a referee is not a magic fairy. Referee need time and occasion to act and help players, because that's our role as a referee, to help players play the full games, good games, fair games. That's our role, but we need help with that also. So you cannot wait till the end of the game and then mourn about your opponent slow playing. You have to act accordingly and quickly.
Okay, but I think that there are also different kinds of slow play, so to say. So one could be the obvious one, right? So the guy just doing stuff slowly, especially when he has, I don't know, a horde army or something. But there are also those instances that I've experienced myself where the dude on the other side of the table would suddenly start asking me questions about my army, for example, and it felt like it wasn't out of genuine interest. It was more because like he wanted to, either distract me or make me bring up the rules and prove something to him. So how do you act in a situation like that? Should I also go to the ref if this is blatant that he's doing that to distract me, or would the ref laugh in my face if I came to him and said that my opponent is trying to distract me from doing what I wanted to do? Tyfus, what do you think?
I think those situations actually happen at ETCs as well. And I think you shouldn't always first go to referee, in a sense that it always sets up kind of different vibe to the whole game. Like when you go to the referee straight up during like pre-deployment, then it's kind of weird, man. Yeah, it's kind of weird. I mean, I get it that you might be scared because you're playing like horde army against horde army, but yeah, like the referee can actually, I think it's not really like a referee's always impose their will, but when you hear from a referee, especially at the tournament like WTC, that, okay, I've noted that. When you are, for example, using chess clocks, when I will come here in 2 turns, I will look at the time and we will see what's going on. And of course, your opponent might be using your time because you're using chess clock wrongly. And if he's asking you personal questions, you do not switch the timer to his side, which that's completely another topic, but you should be, that's your part of the job to make sure your opponent isn't using up your time. You should take care of your time. But in general, from what I've seen, and I think Dave will know more because he revved the first ETC with mandatory chess clocks, it really isn't that much of a problem. And once referee tells the players that there is a problem with the time and you should start speeding up, they actually do that. Go on.
It was a thing at the last ETC with the chess clocks. First of all, it was mandatory to inform the referee if your game is like 20 minutes from the end, and one of the player has less than 10 minutes than his opponent. Something like that. There was like 2 situations when you have to tell the referee that the situation looks like that. But in the practice, the referee co-op was really proactive at this. We spent the last hour of each turn walking by every single table and checking the chess clock to see how the difference in the timing between the players look like, to inform the players that, okay, guy, it's 10 minutes to the end of the round and you have something like that. You have 10 minutes on your chess clock till the end of the game. Do you think you would manage to make your 2 or 3 turns in that time? And you look at the table at his army, what's left of it, what his enemy is doing, etc., etc. And you would just make sure sometime before the end of the game that everything would be in the place and inform the player to make his move faster, etc. Because it was easier way to deal with the things with the slow play than to just wait till the end of the game and then decide who was stalling or just being asshole or just wasn't paying attention to the clock.
Okay. So yeah, so let's look closer at that aspect of, you know, the highest level of competitive play. So the ETC or the WTC, also the singles tournament that happens the day before. Those are pretty much the highest levels of competitive play that you can have. There's, I think in the States you have the LVO, Nova, but in Europe probably ETC is the highest level. Yeah. So from your perspective, what measures are implemented to make sure that all players obey the rules? And maybe, you know, do players adhere to those rules, or are there violations? And if there are, what could those be? Tyfus, what can we start with you?
Yeah. So I think when it comes to tournaments like WTC, it didn't just suddenly started working during the last ETC in 2019. It was a process, and it was like a really long process. I think it was mostly started, when Neil started to be a ref. For those unaware, Neil is like first guy who was playing throughout nearly all years of the tournaments when ETC was actually going on. And he was fed up of all the competitiveness and being a dick. And he wanted to become a ref and like put a stop to that. And I think it was back in 2015 or 16, I think it was Athens, that he started to change all the rules and make sure people are nicer to each other. And it was a process. It took years because we needed to find out what's working, what's not. And what we found out, I think Dejv will be more capable of talking about it because he had more experience during last year. But when it came to tournaments, like when I was reffing back in 2018, we didn't have, for example, chess clocks, but what we had was a threat, but not a threat in a sense that I will beat you up, of course not. But
no, perfect.
but rather in a sense that every player knew that if they failed their team, in a sense that they were unsportsmanlike, etc., their whole team will be penalized for that. And when people actually started noticing that, it's not only them, but you actually ruin the event, not only for your opponent, but for example, for your whole team. Let's say there was one time when one player was caught with the loaded dice, and after he got caught, their whole team was actually really scared that they would be penalized, like all the other players who didn't know about it.
They were afraid that they would be banned from the ETC for the next years.
Because of one guy who was selfish. And I think that it's not really a threat for like one singular player, but for when it comes to WTC, it's more of a team game. So there's like, I don't know the statement in English, but there's like a community penalty for every player that's that's involved. So
social penalty.
yeah,
Or a stigma.
I know the Polish word, but I don't think our non-Polish listeners will actually get what I just said. So I'll skip that. So
I think you've made it pretty clear, yeah.
So when it comes to other tournaments, you actually not those team tournaments, but singles, you actually need to be harsh. Because people usually, when you're a lenient ref or organizer, people will abuse that. There are always people that will try to cross the line. And what actually works is setting up really strict rules. For example, when you have one chance, for example, there's a rule that you can only if you lose on time because your time ran out and your opponent had like 20 minutes left, something like that. If it happens more than once, you're automatically expelled from the tournament. And it can apply both to team tournaments when there would be no one stepping in and you just lose a player and lose one game 20-0. And when it comes to single tournaments, if you just were penalized twice for being a slow player, you wouldn't play any other game. And it's not even that you need to execute those threats, but pure fact that people know that there's someone capable of executing those is what I think the best approach. Even though it's harsh, I would really prefer to not have those. But that's what we actually realized throughout the years, that there's always someone trying to cross the line.
Yeah, and there's still the situation with infractions, cumulative infractions, that if at the turn one the one player would not finish the game in time, and the second game other player from that team wouldn't finish the game at the time, it's not like they're good. They're still getting penalty points that could add up to even losing a round that they would otherwise win. So it's still punishable, and it's still bad for the team. So when you playing at this level, at the WTC, ETC, you just know that you're not playing for yourself. You're playing for your whole team and for your whole country. So the pressure to not lose the points in a stupid way is really high.
Is it also true that it's generally worse for your team to be that problematic person and get penalized than to lose the game, for example?
Yes, of course, because if you reach the highest level of being account and you just get yourself red carded or removed from the time penalties, etc., your team would usually not lose all the next rounds where you wouldn't be able to play, but sometimes even your previous scores would be set to 0 even if you won. So it's much worse to get your team in that position. And still in frictions, if you are doing bad things at the table, you're not playing like a gentleman, you're abusing the rules, you're not being nice, then you're just collect the negative points, and your wins could be overwhelmed by the negative points granted from your infractions. So it's not worth it to win at all cost, because there's a huge difference between being competitive and trying to win at all cost. You can be competitive and be a gentleman and play a good game, and being a whack, being a dick, is not a way to be a good player.
Right, guys, Tyfus just dropped me a line that he needs to drop, so from now on we'll continue just the three of us. Now, does it happen, or has it happened at the ETC that you've been refereeing, that someone actually openly argued with your ruling or a ruling of another referee? And how is that tackled at an event like that?
Maybe some people tried, not with me, because I had my reputation after the first or second day that it's not worth it. It's like I can talk with the players. I always do because I want to know the situation. But once I know it, and once I consult it with other referees if needed, because there's also a rule that if a problem could be solved by just looking at the rule book, codex, or FAQ, or ETC rules pack, the one referee could do it. But if the situation is different, you need a three referees to consult and vote on the ruling. At this point, when the one or three referees make a decision, you are not in a position to argue. It's done. Decision is made and you have to adjust to it. If someone tries at this point, he's just stupid and wasting everyone's time. So
Right. So
it can
I
happen often.
recall that last year I listened to a different podcast that was Vanguard Tactics, but that the host of that is Stephen Box, who I think plays for the UK team. And he made an episode about sportsmanship as well, in which he mentioned that he had a really bad time playing one guy who, among other things, argued with the referee during an event. And it was a
Yes,
major event. It really spoiled the time for Stephen. And Steve then said that the referee took quite long to actually react and to penalize the player for arguing. So he called for, like generally in the Warhammer community, to empower the referees to have more tools, to have more power to react to situations like that. So from your perspective, do you feel empowered do you feel that you have the right tools at hand to, do away with people like that and problems like that?
First things first, at the WTC, I obviously do because referees had strong position. It's really the effect of the referees' work for the years now that they really try their best to be as professional and as good as possible. So right now, the referee corp at the ETC is really something that player respect because they know what they can do and what they do. But on the other hand, I think that's also the question of personality. You just have to be that kind of person to be a referee that if you made your decision, the decision is done. You do not discuss it further. Because when you allow player to get on your head, he would do it if he's an asshole. You wouldn't be able to stop him from this point. He would try it every time to get around you, to make you soft, etc., etc. You just have to be sure what you're doing, why you're doing it, and enforce your rulings. That's all.
Okay. And what about giving yellow cards, red cards? Is that common or is that last resort?
I believe that 2 years ago, when the Tyfus was a referee, it was more common to give yellow cards. Last year, it was not as often as it was 2 years ago. We were more likely to give infliction and warnings. That would also adapt to the negative points for the team. That would have really similar results. And of course, there was that red card for a player with a loaded dice. It was my very own red card that I was able to give him because I was the one to caught him red-handed. It took some time, but we finally find out that he was using that dice and he was just cheating. And yeah, that was a really bad situation for the community. But I'm glad that we discover it in time and just make that decision and make everyone happy that they didn't have to play against something like that.
And in your opinion, is the smaller amount of the yellow cards a matter of players behaving better, or is it just you being more relaxed, let's say?
I believe that sometimes just the vision of getting a card was enough. I often did it because it was like, okay, you do this and this, or you will get carded. And players just would start doing it.
Mm-hmm.
As I said before, it's not a referee mission to punish people. Referee's mission is to make games better. So it's not always the best way to just punish people and give them cards. If they're really assholes, then of course you should, because it could just prevent them from getting elected for the team at the next year. It's also not only the ETC level decision, because sometimes when a player comes back from the ETC with a card, that would say a lot to his community, that we should watch out and try to figure out if he's acting okay. Could we trust him again next year to go? It's something like that, but I believe it's not always necessary to give that card. Sometimes if you can solve the problem with a smaller tool, you don't need a power axe.
Okay, and when you give a card to someone, does that card stick to that player for another tournament, for example? Or, maybe not on the ETC level from year to year, but like in your local scene when you go to tournaments, or in the Polish league maybe, because I don't even know what the stance on that is.
I can't remember any Polish tournament with the cards. It's just decision of the referees, and if you're not happy with the decision, you could leave the tournament. Some people.
That's fair and simple.
Yeah. At the ETC, you have the cards. There was a situation that the cards would stack. So if you have a yellow card at the 2017, the yellow card at 2018 would accumulate to the red card, and you're out. But I don't remember. Right now we are working on the rules pack, and I would just have to take a look again to see if it's still in play, because as everyone knows, or should know, the WTC now split from the ETC, so there's a little less continuity than it was last time. But I believe even if it's not the case at the 2021, it would be in following years.
Okay. And you said that you're currently working on the rules with other referees. So can you give us a little bit of insight on what this actually looks like? Because I understand that there is a team of referees from different countries that talk to each other and basically, work out how a rule should be interpreted and so on. But then I also heard that there is like the captain community, and the captain community is consulted as well. So how does that work?
Okay, so right now I'm in the both groups because I'm the referee for the last year. I was also elected to be referee for 2020, but unfortunately the tournament didn't happen. I'm also at the captain's chat because I'm the head of the Polish league right now. So until we have our new team captain, I'm taking the position to just keep up with the news and inform everyone. So there's two places. One is a referee chat, when you have referees from this year, last year. We have also a Tom who's working with us, and he's a mastermind behind our FAQs. Right now, the situation is mostly like, from time to time, someone pops up the chat with, listen guys, there was a question during a tournament, and we just sit for the next 2 hours discussing how it should be worded, how it should be treated, and should we write it down in a FAQ or not? Is it obvious enough or is it not? It's really grinding through the less clearly written parts of the rule book right now. And there's a captain chat where there's more organization topics at hand, more talking about how the tournament should look, how many games should we have, how much time do we need. Are we happy from that rule, or are we going to allow the Forge World units, etc., etc.? It sometimes could be a mess, because at the point when you have to coordinate over 30 people from different countries, things start to be really messy sometimes, and trying to agree on something, and we try not only to just vote things like 31 to 29, because you know that almost half of the people are not happy with the result, because you try to get a bigger coalition, bigger, more consent for decisions. So it's kinda politics, kinda organization stuff, kinda trying to get the game better. It's hard to really get all the three things together, but it's possible. We're doing it. There's a lot of work from Tom, from Isaac, a lot of work from Neil, captains, etc., etc. We're just trying to work through the year, so when the WTC happens, most of the problems are already behind us, and most of the dilemmas are already done with.
Yeah, it's really cool to know that there is a whole bunch of people behind those decisions, and when the rules pack is released, it's not just a whim of a bunch of dudes, but it's actually a greater group of people that made an agreement.
We
Again, that
already
social
had
contract.
some votings about things, so yeah.
Right.
We're taking it seriously, even the most stupid questions about the rules.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you have to. You don't have any other choice. GW has to go through the same thing, I guess, when they get the questions from players. So, yeah. Tell me this, because I observe that the majority of tournaments have some sort of ruling about modeling. So modeling, as in using, for example, original models, or rules against modeling for advantage. I don't know if that is even a thing still, but yep, maybe you can tell us. And then also ruling about like painting your models. Even GW now grants points for having models painted. Would you say that bringing not original models or unpainted models to local tournaments and so on is also considered unsportsmanlike, or it shouldn't be penalized because not everyone can afford to have the best models or the newest models? Not everyone can paint. What's your approach to that?
I have rather liberal approach to the topic, because I understand the point that you want to play with painted models and against the painted model on the pretty good table, preferably with beautiful sceneries and terrains. But that's something we did in the 7th edition and at the beginning of the 8th edition, and we can all remember that there was many beautiful tables that were just fucking garbage, and it was useless, and playing on them was disaster, because not always the pretty thing is a useful thing. I think it's something similar with the model, because me myself, I'm more the gamer than a painter. I sometimes, when I go to the local tournament, I don't really need to have all my models painted. I sometimes would like to use a proxy of the model. I'm just trying to figure out if I want in my army. I don't buy the model, paint it, and then figure out if I want it in my list. Now it's the other way around. But at the higher level, challengers, masters in Poland, or country tournaments, or at the WTC, yeah, you just go with the painted models. You had your time to prepare. You just do it. It's not that hard. Using proxies is great because it keeps the modeling side of the game fresh. You have some ability to make the guys more for you. It will be your guys. So I really accept proxies. At the WTC, there's a practice that if you want to use not the GW models for the game, you just have to submit them to the referees, and we will decide if they're good or not, if they could replace the original model, and usually there was no problem with that, especially when the models were really well painted and modeled. If the size is right, if the base is right, if the height is right, then why not? Of course, you should try to keep with what you see is what you get. You have to have your war gear represented. all kind of stuff. But if you are done with all of it, there's no modeling for advantage. Then why not? Just do it. It's our hobby. It's our time, our money. If we want to just experiment with something, try something else than Games Workshop models, why not? There's a lot of beautiful alternatives on the market, so just go for it.
Okay, so I guess with models, it's exactly like with the rules. If you have any doubts whether you can bring something to a tournament, and in the same manner,
Ask
if
the referee. It's the
exactly,
easiest way always. Yeah.
or the tournament organizer. So yeah, ask in advance to be sure.
Yeah.
Okay,
Ask before to avoid problems later. General rule of playing tournaments.
great. Okay, Dave, we're nearing the end of the episode. So one last question from me, and that would be, you are, as we said, the head of the Polish league. You are a ref to the WTC. You are a national team member for Poland.
Yeah, I know there
What?
is nothing more I could achieve in this game.
Yeah, I think so. I think you can now retire safely. But as you know, but no, you are a celebrity in Poland, so to say. People know who you are. People recognize you.
That's good. I'm trying to be a nice guy, so I hope it's because of that.
Yeah, it is, but it is apparent. Actually, at tournaments, there is that positive energy coming from you. But the question that I wanted to ask is there anything that you do specifically, for example, to encourage sportsmanship or sportsman-like behavior? Is there or any piece of advice that you can give to people to be better at the game?
Just okay. First of all, it's cliche, but it's a game. And one something that I realized with time is you're gonna have more fun and you're gonna be a better player when you stop getting emotional with your list and with your results. If you build your list like, oh my god, my idea is really great and I bet it's gonna work, and then you go to the tournament and your list is not doing what it's supposed to do, you are not winning, then you're gonna get angry, you're gonna get sad, you wanna try to help your list in some way, maybe try to cheat a little or to be asshole because you're not happy with your list. It's a bad way to do it. Treat your list like some kind of tool. You could change it, don't get attached to it. If it doesn't work, just change it. Okay, you tried, it didn't work, go further. If you're treating your army, your list, your models without emotions, it's easier to play for fun and it's easier to improve as a player. When I play and my list is losing, then of course I can see, look at the game and try to figure out what I did wrong, but then I could just look at my list and figure out, okay, that didn't work, and that worked. So I'm keeping the thing that worked and change the other things. And next time I'm going for a tournament, I'm not angry and trying to prove something that, okay, my list is gonna work this time. No, I'm just having fun again because there's something new I could try. And I can see if it's going to work or it's not going to work. So remember, don't get too attached to your list. It's really not obvious, but it helps.
Yeah, it's a really cool piece of advice. And I just noticed that I noted down a thing that you said at the very beginning of the podcast. You said something about playing for for high stakes, or at least that's the note that I made. And actually, I recall that at some tournaments in the US, there is like a financial reward that you
Oh,
play
yeah.
for, I don't know, $1,000 or something like that. Do you think, this could be implemented, for example, at the ETC? Because I think at the ETC you don't win any money or anything like that. During Polish tournaments in the Polish league, you also don't win any money. Do you think that introduction of such a concept would bring the worst out in people, or is it maybe something that would motivate people additionally on
Both.
top of what they already have?
Obviously, both. From some people, it would really have a bad impact on them because they would just like to get some money. Everyone loves money, it's obvious. And for some people, it would be really motivating. Yeah, of course. Maybe some people would just give it a tournament try. So when they see that they could win some money, I don't believe it would destroy the gameplay or make people that much worse, as it would help bringing some new people into the gaming or just encouraging the old player to get back. We would have to just try it out and see. We always see the bad side of that coin because there are really loud cases when someone at the finals or semi-finals of some really well-paid tournament cheated on someone and got caught and denied, etc., etc. There are cool stories with drama, emotion, bad guy, good guy, who's who, etc., etc. Yeah, people love that shit, but we don't see the silent side of that coin. That people that wouldn't show up for the tournament if it weren't for the encouragement from the money award or from the higher prestige coming with that reward. So there's good sides and bad sides, like every time. I don't see a clear answer right now. I would like to see the tournaments with big prizes in Poland. Because if someone is going to be a dick, he's going to be a dick over one box of tactical marines that you could win at the typical local tournament or something. And he would be also a dick over $5,000. So I believe for those people it doesn't really matter, and for other people it could be an improvement.
Okay. Yeah, I totally agree. So it's something that we could, implement and test. We can observe how others do it. For example, in the US, if it actually brings the worst in people or not. And give it a try for the future. Right, Joker, any last words, any questions? Because we have to wrap the episode.
Yeah, I think that a good summary of our episode about sportsmanship would be just be the guy that you would enjoy playing against.
It's not a cliche at all, but it's
No, but it's very spot on. It's actually, like I said,
others like you would like to be treated. Oh yeah.
Very much.
Exactly.
Very much.
Thank you, Jesus. We're now better people.
Right. Okay. No, but it's a good thing to end an episode with. So, yeah, guys, remember, just respect your opponents. Try to have fun as much as possible. Because if you have fun, your opponent probably will have fun as well.
Big advice: if you are trying to win by cheating, you are not improving as a player. You're getting worse as a player. But so in the long time, it pays off to be a honest player.
And worse as a person as well.
Of course.
To add another cliche.
And you won't go to hell is another good thing of that.
Agreed to all of that. Right, guys. Dejv, it's been a real pleasure to have you.
It was a pleasure for me. Thank you for inviting me. If you would have some more questions for me, I would be glad to step by and answer and make some jokes. That would, I promise, next time I would be more funny.
So I guess if people want to find you, Warhammer 40k, I mean, wh40k.pl, your name is out there in the user list so they can PM you, try to reach you like that, right?
There's no problem. Write me a PM or just find me on the Facebook.
All right.
I think you can find me on the Facebook by my nickname also. So I'll just write Dejv and it would work.
Yeah. Okay. Really cool.
I'm open.
Really cool. Great. So thanks for participation. Thanks, Joker, for co-hosting. And until next time.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Yeah. Thanks. Bye.